No, no, screw it up. Hold on. Okay, here we are. Well, remember that we explore first and foremost this biological related approach for learning. We studied Piaget and the stages of development and active learning and assimilation accommodation. Then we went over Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, and we discussed this interactive approach for learning to take place. If you can remember, we explored a very interesting concept that was internalization. That goes from the interpersonal to the intrapersonal way of learning. That is, that we learn from others and basically from the interaction that happens since we're born. Then we studied Brunner's theory, and we actually identified different concepts such as scaffolding that was linked to Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development, another concept for intelligence. To a certain extent, one theory relates to another, but they came up with specific things that changed the paradigm for education, for psychology, and for pedagogy. And one of them was the importance of language for Brunner. Brunner started taking into consideration that every single thing we learn is connected to language, and language is the main vehicle for us to interact, and language is the main vehicle for us to interact with the environment and with others as human beings. So that's why the role of language started to have a very important role for structuralism, for psychoanalysis, for deconstruction, for sociology, for anthropology. Since Durkheim, since the concept of culture, and well, this was important because we evolved, we kept up with the rhythm of changes, and Krashen in the 1980s, took the concept of innatism, this learning theory and language acquisition theory that is stated that we have a language acquisition device, was taken by Chomsky a couple of years earlier. And well, he started developing, theories on language learning, foreign language learning, and then second language learning. And he actually figured out that many people could follow the same patterns we do in our early age, So we follow the same process for L1 acquisition in order to acquire a foreign language or a second language. That's very interesting and has got a couple of implications. All of them are intertwined, they are interweaving to a certain extent. And that's why I decided to start the presentation with a couple of advantages and disadvantages of using DL2 in the classroom. The use of the target language might provide with comprehensible input if do it correctly, of course, and systematically, and exposure for the students on the language is going to be enhanced and work out. This is very important because in foreign language context, the contact we have with the language might be very short because you can only have contact with the English language in the classroom, and not only in the classroom, you know, but hardly ever do you have contact with English native speakers, you know, which is one of the comprehensible input hypotheses, that you need to be in contact with the language in a meaningful way that works for you. It depends on your personality, of course, on your needs, but it also depends on the environment of learning, on your context, your learning context. Now, the use of the target language in the classroom, used by all means at all times, could provide with exposure, with straightforward instructions, with explanations that take longer, yeah, let's say 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And one disadvantage could be that you are somehow investing more time, you know, in a single activity, and you start there and you cannot keep on going and cover all the units you needed to. And well, you know, this might be very dangerous, not for learning, but, you know, for your job, right? Because you need to cover all the units you were asked to, and because you need to keep up with language policies and what authorities suggest. Another advantage that it could be feasible is that some of the learners you got in the classroom might feel more confident to start using the language. The moment they see you use L2 all the time, they feel motivated and they really want to understand what you are saying. They really want to reproduce what you are doing. It's a kind of a role of a model, you know, you're a model. They see that, you know, and everybody starts interacting with the L2. At least they try. It depends on the age, right? But it happens with children, it happens with teenagers, which is very important, you know, and interesting, and it happens with young adults. Now, on the other hand, you might have a couple of students, you might see a couple of classmates who are frightened, who feel really nervous, and who feel really anxious when they need to use the L2 in front of the classmates. So if you continue speaking with the target language, using the L2 all the time in the classroom, some of them might feel frightened, and you know, demotivation could take place. So I don't know if you have seen that with your mates or in your own experience, but a couple of teachers decide to talk personally, individually with a couple of students, you know, using the L1, maybe outside the classroom, in order to build this bond, in, you know, because they know it's necessary for keeping up with the rhythm of the group, you know. So that could be a disadvantage that you can work on as a teacher, and that you might have experience in your classes, in your previous classes, in your background with different classmates. Another advantage, of course, is the real language in use. By means of the, you know, YouTube videos or videos you have recorded, or conversations you've had with native speakers, English native speakers, of course, and videos that you can show when you went abroad, or constraints or cultural differences, trying to bring real situations in the classroom, because that's going to be the most important input for the students, and you have that opportunity, you know. It's also important to contextualize information, okay, to bring cultural diversity in your classroom. You know, the way people speak English in Latin America, the way people speak English in South Africa, um, real things that have impact in our contemporary world. That could be one advantage. Another disadvantage that might be related to that one, it's that if you haven't got the level and if you haven't certified your language, you need to, you know, I think it's your responsibility as a language student. Um, a language student needs to certify language, you know, nationally or internationally. And it's a, you know, lifelong exercise you need to keep on doing. You need to certify your B2 level, your C1 level, and the moment you got the C2 level, you continue working on your language, on lexis, on vocabulary, on using the language. You need to do it. It's because language is alive, it's changing all the time, and it's your responsibility to keep up with the language if you want to become a teacher, and if you want to provide with a module role for the students to follow. So a disadvantage could be to provide with wrong models for students to follow. So it's a language learner responsibility. If you're going to go over the translation field, you also need to keep on working with English, which is going to be the main vehicle, but also with different languages such as Spanish, Italian, German, French, and well, you need to keep on studying and certifying your language. You know, that's a professional exercise. One more advantage is that you can work with the routines we discussed with Brunner. Routines are little rituals. I don't know if you had the opportunity to watch a video I shared last week. It was a video on how to use a couple of routines in your classroom for the students to be committed and to feel secure in the classroom. And also to include chunks of language in order to increase the vocabulary storage. The opportunity to use it when giving instructions, whether regarding spoken discourse or written discourse. The routines can be really helpful when introducing new chunks of language for the students. You do it progressively, you do it systematically and step by step by following routines. So it's really beneficial for them because you're using the L2 at all times. One of the disadvantages could be the lack of reflection. Okay, and this usually happens at the beginning of language acquisition or language learning. Students usually enjoy playing. Students usually enjoy being immersed and committed to the activity, but they don't really reflect or come out with a critical thinking related at first, because they understand, let's say, 20% of what you're saying. Okay, this is going to be one of the disadvantages at the beginning. But then, you know, the benefits for language development are going to be, you know, really important. You know, they're going to be relevant, and reflection, deep thought, critical thinking, higher order thinking skills are going to be developed eventually, as long as you provide with the proper content and comprehensible input, according to Krashen. Now, another advantage, sorry, learners' motivation. Some of them feel really motivated. On the other hand, some others lose their interest, you know, and they find it really frustrating and difficult to continue working with the language. Another advantage could be fluency at a very early age, at the beginning. And on the other hand, you know, professors or instructors cannot cover the whole units of a syllabus design, you know, which is something I wanted to highlight, because the external factors also play a very important role in your implementation in your job. And in the end, whatever you do, it's gonna be controlled to a certain extent by external factors. But the important thing of teaching is that you have the freedom to share your thought, you know, and I think that's very important. It's a kind of vocation. Next, the use of L1 in our context, Spanish, right? Let's explore a couple of situations for using the L1 in the classroom. When a learner is upset, okay, you demonstrate that you are empathetic, that you really want to build rapport, that you really want to make bounds, and that you're really interested in learning, you know, and teaching. So that could be one situation for using the L1. Another one, when students know the answer of a question the teacher asks, they keep on using L1, but you know that rather than being a constraint, you know, it's a sign, that students are actually understanding. So that's another use of the mother tongue. It usually happens with children, you know, when you're teaching children, you speak English all the time and they answer in Spanish, but they understand everything you're saying. So this is a process, and it also has to do with the silent period we're going to check. Another situation, when students want to express a real experience and they want to communicate a message, okay, or you know, when you really want to communicate a message as a teacher, okay, meetings with parents and talking about children, or when you want a topic to stop because you have something to say and that's very relevant for students who are just in the A1 or A2 level, etc. For students or teachers who want to joke, remember that this is a pragmatic skill that's developed progressively. Well, if you really want to joke, that could work for the affective domain in the classroom and developing rapport. Check understanding whether everything was understood. If there is a question, but you have different strategies for that. You know, there is usually this student who is willing to explain everything to their classmates because they understood everything. That could be one of the strategies to follow. And another situation is the use of organization skills, self-awareness, self-recognition. And well, L1 could work for having this inner dialogue of organization, organizing your work, and also systematizing the procedures in the classroom. Well, L1 could work a lot. So we could take advantage of L1, you know, according to different authors. Yeah, according to Krashen, we have a very different story. You know, according to Krashen, we should use the L2 for everything at all times, because that's going to be the recreation, the restatement of the procedures we follow for learning L1. Krashen is a linguist. He still does research in very different countries and contexts. He's been interested in linguistics since the 1980s. He came to Mexico for giving a couple of lectures in 2013. He started doing research on foreign language acquisition and provided with a couple of were a turning point for teachers in Mexico. He also studied bilingualism, a linguistic phenomena on on individuals, people who went to the United States. I mean, Mexican people, and also Mexican people who came back to Mexico after living in the United States. And the processes of brain work were really astonishing for his theory. Well, according to Krashen, if you have any question or if you have any comment, you can let me know. Well, according to Krashen, language acquisition, it's a subconscious way. You acquire the language unconsciously and you get really involved in a topic, in content. Richards and Rogers call it the subject of the matter. You get really involved in what is happening in the activity, in the topic, in the content, in the procedure, that you almost forget that you are acquiring language. And this could be implemented at any stage. These stages of PJ, when working with children, when working at university, or even for postgraduate students. On the other hand, language learning is the process of learning lists of vocabulary, creating your charts, creating your flashcards. It's a process for becoming aware of the language, knowledge of the matter. Here we have knowledge of the matter, knowledge of the subject matter. So language learning is a process in which you are really conscious of that you are aware of the fact that you want to know about the language. Okay, to know the language as well, because you want to communicate, but you want to know about the language. This is usually what adults do when they are trying to attend a foreign language centers or private classes at home, etc. The results, the outcomes of language acquisition, might be when you understand everything people say, and when you understand written discourse, and you didn't figure out the ways and the procedures in which that happened, but you are able to do it. And language learning is a conscious process of getting to know how you achieve learning goals, language learning goals. Now, for both processes to take place, according to Krashen, there is one hypothesis he established and he worked for years. And that hypothesis is the most important one for his theory. Is the comprehensible input hypothesis. According to Krashen, this comprehensible input tool process is a receptive one, in which the language learner gets everything from the target language, culture, society, of course, language, a content related to the country, phenomena, literature, investigation, songs. Comprehensible input needs to be contextualized for the age, the personality, the environment, the territory. So comprehensible input is going to be a process for being involved of language and what is around language. Krashen states that children should acquire their second language rather than learn it by means of this suitable input, the comprehensible input hypothesis. Let's check what he was trying to get at. But before that, check this picture, okay? The role of the teacher, I mean, the language teacher, for the comprehensible input to work is to provide with information that might be challenging for students, okay, and that is accurate and suitable for them. It follows the same procedure as the zone of proximal development and scaffolding. We're talking about understood as papers, as people, as art, you know, or content in general. This is very important because for Krashen, input can be found everywhere, okay? And it's in there, you know, challenging students, but trying to avoid feelings of frustration at the same time. So has to be measured or understood. Yeah, I would say it has to be understood and contextualized. Now, uh, for the theory of Krashen, for his work, there is one period that has to do also with the hypothesis of the critical period. Krashen, there is a period of silence, you know, in which students are receptive. This could happen in childhood, and according to him, it does. But it could also be appearing in different stages in life. There are a couple of students that you might have observed um, who are really focused on what the teacher says, and they are receiving the input, you know, and they try to digest the information. They take longer than others, and it takes time to understand everything. I mean, the input, and they hardly ever produce. This is because it's a process, you know, that some individuals follow in order to cope with meaning and to cope with language. The moment they feel secure, the moment they feel confident enough to speak up, they produce. But it's a long process, you know. And this is actually, you know, what happens with personality types. Okay, and that's why it's very important to go over Jung's personality types and learning styles as well, because everybody's different. And if you want to become a teacher, identifying this period is going to be very important for providing with suitable comprehensible input. Otherwise, you know, students are going to give up. You know, they're not going to understand what is going on with language learning, and this silent period might be a turning point for language learners, you know, whether children or adults. You can explore this hypothesis in depth. I'm going to share a couple of papers for you to read. Now, where is this amount of hypothesis for Krashen to focus on acquisition? Okay, the main idea of Krashen is that all people can acquire the language, and of course, this would represent and would imply changes in the national education system. It does not because of several reasons, whether language policies or the government or politics or, authorities, language policies, etc., or books, and many more factors. But according to Krashen, everybody is able to acquire in any context, as long as they have comprehensible input. They are monitored, and the monitor hypothesis is very interesting. It has to do with different personalities and how the monitoring process might vary according to the stages and personalities of students. The natural order that argues that grammar needs to be developed in a predictable manner. Okay, so here we start discriminating deductive approaches and inductive approaches. So that was really meaningful for the language field agenda. The input hypothesis, comprehensible input, and the role of the affective domain when learning languages. So the affective filter is also an element that Krashen shed light on, that wanted to focus on, and it was also very important at that time and nowadays, because we have Bloom's taxonomy for working with emotions and feelings, and they are related to language because we are human beings, right? According to Krashen, the best language teaching activities are those in which students are really involved, concentrated, that they forget they are learning another language. This is summarizing the five hypotheses. Let's explore each of them in detail. Okay, just as a summary, acquisition is the product of an unconscious process very similar to the process we follow when acquiring the L1. Okay, remember, children crying because they want to be fed, because they want to be hugged, because they want their mothers to come. Interaction, environment, but also elements around that have meaning for you, and repetition, of course, drills. Learning is the product of formal instruction, and it comprises a conscious process which results in conscious knowledge about the language. Okay, this has to do with what other authors have called metalinguistic skills. Okay, that you really know the procedures of the language. This is a process we need to undergo if we want to become professionals of the language. Okay, and that might be the difference between the students who are really skillful at certification exams and those who are not, although they are really competent at speaking, And it could also be the difference, between the B2 level and the C1 level, which is a quite different, it's quite a process. The monitor hypothesis. Okay, the monitor hypothesis explains the relationship between acquisition and learning, and defines the impact of the impact of learning on acquisition. Okay, not the other way around. The monetary function is the practical result of the learned grammar. So this is predictable and systematic. According to Krashen, The acquisition system device is the utterance initiator, while the learning system performs the role of the monitor. This is very interesting, okay? So we have a language acquisition device in our, but it's a we are natural born speakers. We are natural born language users, and that's the initiator in order to produce whether a sound or a word. Now, the learning system, it's kind of a symbolic conscious, you know, that plays the role of moderator, you know. It actually sets the procedures for you to follow this other side, which is the natural skill you have to produce language. This is the monitor hypothesis all about. You will see. According to him, there are overuses of the monitor hypothesis. There are underusers and there are optimal users. So you divide your brain. Yeah, this is an analogy. You divide your brain and you have your natural way of speaking and you have your monitoring space on the right. Okay. According to him, overusers are students who have not learned or who prefer not to use their conscious knowledge. Underusers are the students that use the monitor appropriately when necessary. I'm sorry, that's optimal users. Yeah, underusers, the ones who like to go for the language acquisition device. My bad. And overusers, you know, the ones who need to follow this part of your system that needs explanations, guidelines, etc. It's another way to structure, you know, our needs. Okay, it's another way, another approach. An evaluation of the person's psychological profile can help determine to what group they belong. And also self-recognition and self-exercise. And that's the importance of the strategies course at the beginning of the BA. You know, usually these monitor users read to Jung's personality types, sensing, sequential, free spirits, etc. We're about to finish, sorry. The natural order has to do with the acquisition of grammar following a natural and predictable manner. For a given language, grammar tends to be acquired early while others late. So according to the natural order, you know, grammar, the nature of grammar it might be beyond deduction. Okay, we explore a, well, I don't know if you were in my classroom, I don't think so, but there are certain patterns that are edified, that are constructed by your own when you're learning a language. You start creating rules, you know, and those rules are personal, and that those might be patterns that you find out in language, regardless of the orders of language established by a certain community. This is a very interesting. We are running out of time. I'm sorry, I have another class. Well, the input hypothesis, we already talked about it. The affective filter, which is working on the affective domain, feelings and emotions, and how you know, motivation, self-confidence, anxiety, stress, frustration can be worked out by means of the affective filter, by giving praise, you know, praising students, working on instructions, grading, feedback plays a paramount role here. Okay. And well, to finish up, the effective language teacher is someone who can provide with comprehensible input, help make it meaningful and comprehensible in a low anxiety situation. This is the summary of Krashen's hypothesis. I'm going to share the readings with you. Here you have the references. The theory started in the late 1980s, and they are current. You know, this day and age. Krashen keeps on doing research, and well, I hope you find it interesting because it's gonna be very relevant for the next units. How to teach grammar, how to teach vocabulary, whether to teach grammar by following a communicative approach or by following deductive or inductive approaches, or how to teach vocabulary, how you learned vocabulary, the best way to teach pronunciation, how to teach literacy skills, how to teach speaking, listening, the differences between receptive and productive skills. That's going to be important for you. Okay, the four theories: Piaget, Vygotsky, Brunner, Krashen. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being here, for your response papers, for all the activities you've been working on. I think Unit 1 was a success. That's what I believe. That's my personal opinion. And I really appreciate it for your critical thinking, for your efforts, and for understanding that we are in a process of change. Change is not easy, it's very difficult. We are facing this educational paradigm change, and well, I think we are doing it well. I don't know you. Any comments? Because we're about to leave. Does anybody have a comment?
No, teacher. No, it's okay.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna send you an email on Monday. We're going to start with Unit 2, and it's gonna be the nature of grammar, how to teach grammar, and how people learn grammar. Okay, those presentations on language learning theories are gonna be very important for you to take into consideration. Okay, on Monday, I will be sending you the files if you want to read more about Krashen, and also the tasks for Unit 2 so that you can keep on working. You will start working on Monday and you will have time for delivering the activities. Okay, so we're going to start cutting down on the amount of tasks, but they're going to be more complex and more meaningful for you. Thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely weekend. Take care and, well, keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, teacher. See you.
Thank you, teacher.
Thanks for your time. Beautiful work, Thank you. Lovely group.
See you.